and welcome to today's episode of the SharpFit for Life podcast. And today, our topic is
movement.
It's almost like we had that one organised in choreography, didn't it? It's
Almost. Nearly forgot though.
It's not like I just dropped you in at the last second and just looked over and asked you for the word without asking you for the word.
We smashed it.
We definitely did, definitely. And so movement is kind of one of those kind of key things which everyone expects when you talk about health and fitness and performance and actually kind of improving yourself personally. It's because it's the second part of those mechanical items. So last episode we talked a lot about meals and food and nutrition and all those side of things. So this is the other typical one that people kind of expect.
Agreed. Food first, then movement.
So there's obviously different types of movement we've got in our body. The first one is the kind of non-exercise related movement. So the stuff that we kind of do every day. And then the other part of movement we've got is the kind of the exercise related ones.
Where does primal movements come in? I've heard you talk about primal movements quite a bit before.
So when we talk about things like primal movements, those are going to be exercise specific. But primal movements are basically things that we've done for years. Basically, it's naturally a part of what we do as humans. And in fact, if you look at what primates do, a lot of them kind of do the same types of movement. And it's things like, for example, being able to squat and lunge and bend and hinge. And
so it goes beyond everyday movement.
Yeah. So
in modern society.
Yeah. So it is everyday movement, but in modern society, we don't tend to do as much of it.
Mm-hmm.
So things like, for example, you getting in and out of the car is actually, you are engaging some of those kind of primal movements. Getting up and down from the floor is engaging some of those movements. Carrying things like back and forth from the shop, etc. are. But as people getting less and less mobile because they're doing more and more sedentary type jobs. I mean, office jobs are now almost prolific everywhere. And even if you don't have an office job, the crazy thing is the aspects of working on computers or having to do some form of paperwork means that even some of the more outdoorsy job are actually starting to have an office-based component of it. I mean, for example, if we think of Justin, so Justin's the friend of mine that I do the snow sculpting with, and he owns a tree surgery business and gardening business. And the reason why he actually developed that business was actually for health benefits. He kind of looked over various different occupations and realized that actually gardeners tend to live longer, seem to live happier. And it meant that he also had an outlet for his creative talents. So as a trained figurative sculptor, he was able to then do things like topiary. He was able to do things like sculpting gardens and things. And he does some amazing things there. But even in his job, which is a very much an outdoorsy job, right? I mean, we hear about all the adventures when he kind of falls out of trees or when he's cut the wrong thing down.
Because it fell out of a tree onto a trailer.
He did, yeah. You remember
pretty
that?
ruthless.
I think, crumbs, you're quite young at the time. Yeah, he absolutely massively bruised his back and things. So yeah, you'd imagine that kind of job being incredibly outdoorsy. But even today, there is now becoming more of an office-based component of it. You know, he still has to do his paperwork at the end of each week to make sure invoices have gone out, to make sure payments have come in, to make sure he's doing things like his marketing that he needs to do for the business. So even with an incredibly outdoorsy job, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're completely away from having to do some of those office-based activities.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were going to say something profound then for a second.
Just
right, okay. So we're kind of thinking about that, and we've got obviously that's non-exercise related thermogenesis effect, what we're talking about. So how your body can utilize that energy just in everyday activities. So things like, for example, gardening. You're not necessarily doing that as a piece of exercise, but you're just using your body, and therefore it works really well. Even things like fidgeting, and certainly when I used to work in the office a lot more than I do these days. What I found was even simple things like putting in place, just going around and making everybody a coffee once an hour. It does several things. One is it gets you out of your seat, so you're actually moving and you're moving away from the screen, and that gives you a great mental reset because you're able to change your horizon and things. But also, you've got this thing where you're building rapport with a lot of people because all of a sudden you're helping them, you're giving them a coffee, you're giving them reason to have a break and have that conversation.
I think there's definitely a big rabbit hole there. You could probably do a full episode on that.
We definitely could. I mean,
of like having breaks and staring into the distance for your eyes. And like standing versus sitting at a desk. But you should be doing both, really. But as I say, like full episode on that probably.
Yeah, we can definitely do that in the future. And again, this is the kind of the key reason why when we're helping our clients, we have that multimodal, multifaceted approach. We do the 3-day in-person workshops so people can get that condensed version of being able to really immerse themselves and pull out as much of this information as they can in a short period of time. That kind of more of a longer form so people can do it over a 3, 4, 5 month period, doing it online, paying their own time, etc. So again, that reinforcing piece, and also being able to handhold people through those kind of changes, so they can ask those kind of questions from a mentor, somebody who's actually had that been through that before, and the community of people as well around it. Because again, it's not always the same unless you've got that community of people that you can share with. Then all of a sudden, you find actually there's different things, different ways you can shape these things. So yeah, there's definitely plenty of content we can dig into there. But let's get back to the kind of high level of movement. So we've kind of looked at things like that, non-exercise related. So almost like the fidgeting, the walking, all that kind of side of things. And I know you're an avid walker. I know you quite enjoy getting out and about, etc.
Yep, for sure. You love hiking. Maybe not the Cleveland way. Don't know if I'd want to do that again.
That's probably because we did it in 5 days rather than 9.
And it was not 109 miles. It lied.
120, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, like 122.
But some of those, the views are breathtaking.
Oh yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah,
I just want to do it again.
And to do it in 5 days, I mean, that's a hell of an achievement when you think about it. 120 odd miles, and then raising money and raising awareness for the RNLI as well. So.
Oh, it was a great thing to do. We should do something similar again.
Oh, we constantly will be. So we've got the Teenage Cancer Trust one coming up this year with the 3 marathons. That's
I'm not doing that though.
Well, okay, yeah, you're not doing that. Well, in which case, let's get a walking place and we'll get something to do there.
Sounds good.
Yeah, let's think about the challenge up in that one.
If you got any ideas, drop them in the comments below.
Oh, crumbs! That's opened up the possibility there. I was chatting to a guy the other day actually at an event we was running. A chap called Pat Falvey. You may have heard of him. He's one of the only people in the world who's done all 7 of the highest peaks twice. And he's
I guess he's been at K2.
Yeah. He's spent time down in Antarctica and things. Amazing gentleman. So he's invited us to Southern Ireland to go do the largest hill in Ireland. So yeah, maybe we use that as the opportunity to raise some funds for a worthwhile cause. Maybe.
Well, while we're on the topic of walking, like, how good is it for you? Because I know it like activates a lot of the muscles in your body, pretty much most of them. I think it's great personally, like even for mindset and clarity.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, walking is one of those things which is dismissed by a lot of people because you do it every day, and you're right. It uses pretty much every single muscle group possible. Your body was designed to walk and designed to move, so it's absolutely perfect, and it's so accessible for so many people. That ability just to be able to step out and walk. You don't need to have any specialist equipment. You don't need to put a massive distance on these things, but you just by the act of going out and having a walk is great. Now, there's kind of 2 schools of thought on this. If you're just going out for a walk and it's just a nice stroll, etc., you're not really pushing your heart rate up, etc., or doing anything excessive, then it's kind of just your normal background movement, really. It's almost like your non-exercise related stuff. Whereas actually, if you're going for a hike or you're going to put some serious miles on, or you're going to do some serious elevation, then that's actually going to start to stress your body, because as you start to push into like 3, 4, 5 miles per hour effectively, especially when you start trying to do that at an elevation, then straight away you're going to kick in into that kind of like not just that low intensity steady state cardio, but probably up towards that kind of midway in your heart rate range as well.
And it is good. Well, especially in like mountain walking, it's good for using different types of muscles in your legs, because like the incline is a lot different to the decline. And you get a bit of flat, which is lovely, but it is like that gets your heart rate up, and like the decline very much gets your calf.
Yeah, definitely.
Incline your thighs a bit more.
Yeah, and also all the other ancillary muscles, because many of these are not necessarily on a flat surface, even a flat incline or a flat decline. There is such a thing. You've kind of got your footings not necessarily always even. You've got to have the tight like pulls on things like your abductors or your adductors as you kind of moving your legs, and you kind of putting those micro adjustments in all the time. So it's absolutely fantastic. Is walking a great way of being able to just get out there and make a start, and certainly something, if you are going to include it for things like hiking, etc., such a beautiful way of exploring the world. Open up the lungs, open up the eyes, open up the ideas. You know.
So I have a question. What do you think to counting steps, like trying to get to that golden like 20,000 steps a day or whatever it is? Because to me, I just don't think it's worth it if you're moving a lot of other ways. But because I do a lot of other exercise, there's a possibility that I don't need to do it, which is why I don't feel like I need to do it. But maybe if people don't have that sort of exercise hobby, if it's like a good thing to be doing, like what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's always interesting, some of these numbers that people come out with, and the 10,000 steps a day. When you actually look,
Is that what it is? 10?
it's 10,000 steps. Yeah, and I can't remember the date, etc. But it was actually a pedometer manufacturer in Japan that actually came up with the whole do the 10,000 steps a day. So as you can imagine, that was probably to sell more pedometers. Okay. And that was kind of picked up by other people, and then other people have then found certain health benefits can come from it. Is it a good thing? I think yes, in the fact that anything that actually gets people moving and starts that process of understanding something about their health is better than nothing. But it's a bit like, for example, when you think about the baseline that people are asked to do of 150 minutes a week of exercise. It's kind of like it's the bare minimum. So it's like, it's not going to improve you overly, but it's better than death. So it's kind of just that one little bit above. So really then when you start thinking, okay, well actually how do you really start to improve your performance so that actually these things really benefit you? It's then taking it to that kind of next level. So it's not just the steps that you get in place, but it's how you get those steps in place and what it's doing to your body while you're doing that. So when you are doing the steps, do it at a pace which is increasing your heart rate. And it was really interesting because I did a piece of work with a law firm. They were specialized in M&As. And one of the things I asked them is, how many people exercise here, etc. And everyone around the boardroom, they were saying, yeah, we do the 10,000 steps a day. It's kind of almost like a corporate challenge type of thing to make sure everyone's kind of feeling fit and healthy. I says, that's great, actually. It's great. Everyone's kind of moving and you've got that kind of viewpoint. But how many of you are actually doing it at a rate that's increasing your heart rate? So it's actually having an impact on your cardiovascular capabilities, actually improving your performance. And nobody was. Nobody even had thought about it or heard about it. And it's really taking that next step and saying, okay, great, we've got some basics in here, but how do we actually build on that and actually get something more from it? Because let's face it, as business people, we're all busy, right? But and if this was a business opportunity, you would always be looking for a return on investment. And you're looking for a return on investment of money that you might put into a business deal or on time that you've put into something. And the same thing should be happening with your health as well. So if you're investing your time, and let's face it, time is the most valuable commodity because you cannot get it back. Once you've used it, it's gone. Then you want to be able to say, okay, well, actually, I'm making the most use of that investment of time. So for walking, it might be a case of making sure you are at that higher pace. If it's things like weight training, for example, resistance training, it might be then taking that opportunity, not just to move the weight. I mean, let's face it, we go to so many gyms and you see people kind of throwing the weights around like some mad gorilla, and you're lucky that they pull their arms out of their own sockets. But actually then getting people to just like concentrate more on what they're doing, slow the motions down, be more purposeful through it, understand the kind of 3 key stages that each of those motions is going through. So you've got the eccentric phase, you've got your hold, you've got your your squeeze, effectively. I've forgotten the word for it. Concentric, that's the one. So each kind of stage, you're putting as much effort into it so you maximize your output. And you can only do that really by focusing your attention on the task at hand, not on the moving of the weights, but actually on the the squeezing of the muscles and engaging and firing off as many muscle fibers as you possibly can, and then again actually resisting that kind of at that eccentric phase. That's like the deload phase. So resisting that, so that so again it takes longer, so you're actually under load for longer.
So you're talking here about maximizing your movement
Yeah, so it's like
in the time that you have instead of just
yeah, 100%. And then that way, you get the best return on your investment.
No, that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, then you can start to get some really interesting stuff like twofers. I like a good 2-for-1 offer, and everyone else like a good 2-for-1 offer. And when you really start to focus and hone, not only do you get more benefit from doing the movement and doing the exercise, but then you can start to really do things in a very mindful way, which means that actually you create that space in your own head. So very similar in a way to meditation. You can kind of create that space in your mind where actually everything else doesn't matter, and that starts to engage that kind of feeling of flow.
I mean, we're talking on the last episode, or maybe the episode before, about comfort zones. I guess it's important that you just keep like pushing that boundary a bit too, and don't just get too settled.
Yeah, because this comes back to the basics of how the body changes. You've got a law of specific adaptations by imposed demands, which basically means that once your body gets used to something, then it doesn't see it as a demand anymore. You've built that baseline. So your body's like the best, most efficient employee you could ever have. And it's always looking to save energy where it can. And it'll be looking at, how can it remove certain bits of muscle? How can it build bits of muscle as it's needed? Does it need to be doing certain things? And effectively, it's trying to reduce the amount of energy you're constantly taking. So with that, and you've got this kind of built-in efficiency going on, if you're not increasing the demands over time, then your body just kind of plateaus and actually starts to go the other way around. And that's why a lot of people, for example, they end up in this position where they may have lost some weight, or they may have built an amount of performance, and then they either plateau or start going backwards. So all of a sudden they think, hang on, I'm still eating the same amount, still eating the same calories, etc., but I'm putting weight on now. What's going on? This wasn't happening for the last 3 months or something. And it's just down to the fact your body's just becoming more efficient. And saying, for example, with becoming more performant, if you're looking at moving a certain way, after a while you kind of plateau out, and actually it's just easy. You're no longer pushing your body. Your body's no longer trying to create any more muscle around those things. Same with things like running, same with like cycling, etc. You kind of hit that plateau. So you have to keep kind of increasing it up, and that can come in different ways. For weights, it might be slowing the movement down, it might be increasing the weight, it might be increasing the number of reps. You've got a lot of different levers you can kind of move with it. With running, for example, it might be increasing the pace, increasing the tempo, increasing the cadence of your strides. It might be increasing the distance that you're doing. It might be actually just taking on board and doing a different style. So it might be, for example, going for a hill run. It might be going for a speed run. It might be doing intervals. It might be doing tempo runs. It might be doing fartlek runs. And by mixing things up, all of a sudden your body's not quite adapting to one thing or another. So it's always trying to second guess what's going on. And yeah, it always reminds me of, that thing Arnold Schwarzenegger did. Because obviously back in the day, there wasn't quite as much scientific evidence as there is today. And then one of the things he used to say is you just got to shock the muscle. You got to kind of give it something different. You got to make it guess what's coming up next. And today we know more about that. We know the specific adaptation by imposed demands. Whereas back in the day, they kind of just learnt this through the fact that actually that's how they were growing muscle.
Nice. So now we're aware of why it's important and how to create resistance around that type of training. How do we execute that type of training?
So with the execution side of it, obviously create yourself a great plan, so you know what.
So is it about building it into your routine again?
Yeah, absolutely, and periodizing it and changing it so that you know that you've got that kind of variety. I mean, sometimes you might find that you can do the same activity for 4, 8, 12 weeks, and you're still changing, you're still adapting throughout that period. But other times, actually, you might find that you get bored within that period, in which case the change is more for mental stimulation than it is necessarily for body adaptation. And then there's other times when actually your body isn't adapting as fast because you've actually pushed it to its limits, and therefore you just do something completely different, which means that it has to now start adapting in a different way, even if it's just a kind of slight tweaking movements. Because as an example, when you do things like a squat, you're still using your quads, but when you're doing a lunges, they're still using your quads, but you use a different set of ancillary muscles around them. So there's different ways of being able to bring different things in and still be able to improve.
Lovely stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like it.
It is super cool. How about stretching?
Stretching.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely one that's on the agenda, especially for those of us that are getting slightly older these days.
Yeah, because stretching is something that I don't do, but really need to do. Like, I imagine it has so many benefits, but it's just, I think it's the one that's the hardest to motivate to do because, especially at my age, I just feel like I don't need it, but that's just not true.
Yeah, well, we know that's not true because I can definitely pull the
tricep extension.
Yeah, well, what is it? It's the easy bar.
The easy bar on the tricep.
We're doing the skull crushers, yeah. So I can pick that off the ground. I've still got to hand it to you at the moment. So,
I'm about as flexible as a breadstick.
But that's the thing, you know. I've been stretching now for quite a while, and it helps give me that kind of level of mobility.
Well, I think it is definitely important for like future proofing yourself too, to like at least create it, so then you can maintain it, or get to a point where you can maintain. Because the older you get, the worse it's going to be.
Yeah, and stretching the muscles out, it also helps to kind of release any kind of knots. It helps release some of the fluids, etc., that's in the muscles or being held at that point. And if you go through like developmental stretching kind of movements, it also then helps you in a position where you can start to grow the size of the muscles. Because if you can imagine, if you're stretching them out just that little bit more, it gives space for more muscle fibers to be like created out of those great meals that you've been talking about on the last episode.
Yeah, as you this makes sense to me that as you're creating your muscle during strength training, it's muscle you didn't have before that needs stretching.
Is it muscle? Yeah, well, everything kind of needs stretching. It isn't just new muscle.
Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like for mobility, like you could get like really strong and jacked, but then the muscle would become in the way, and you could move how you used to move.
Yeah,
makes sense to me in my own head without any like a scientific knowledge to back that one up.
I kind of see where you're going with that one, and there's kind of things that do happen like that. So, for example, if you're having a bicep day and you're really, really caning your biceps, lots of like maybe alternating curls or bicep curls or drag curls or whatever kind of curls you're putting in place for your biceps, that over time, the metabolic stress that you're kind of building up there will increase the kind of the amount of stored blood that's in there, the amount of stored lactic acid, etc. And it can mean that it starts to restrict the mobility that you have. And that's, again, one of the key reasons why stretching afterwards becomes really crucial, because it helps that fluid kind of to dissipate as well, which means that your delayed onset muscle soreness can be reduced slightly. You're probably still going to get it, especially if you've really kind of worked out hard enough. And in fact, there's three ways of growing muscle, right? There's the metabolic stress we just mentioned about, so that's where effectively we're going to be working the muscle and building up this kind of fluids and building up the work that's going in there. You've got progressive overload, so this is where we're effectively increasing the amount of resistance that we're moving with those muscles, and then we've also got the delayed onset muscle soreness. So this is the kind of after effect of almost like tearing the muscles during that kind of workout and damaging them, where the repair process is going in place,
which is an awesome feeling.
Yes, it is. But it's one of those kind of things when you say it to somebody when they're first starting, you're going to say, okay, you're going to start chasing this feeling of soreness afterwards, and it's going to feel amazing, and everyone looks like you as if you're on some weird other planet. And the reality is, it's a hard concept to get your head around. And it reminds me of when I had that conversation with Gemma. And she was an amazing lady, runs her own businesses and things, young kid and stuff, and just as a single parent, just cracks on with it, really does. And when I mentioned this to her when she was first starting to go through her change to really bring herself to become more performant, she just said I was nuts, and she's never going to be in a position where she enjoys the soreness of anything. And after about 3 months of training and suddenly realizing actually the soreness came as a result of putting the work in.
Yeah, because it becomes harder and harder to get as well. So as you did mention, kind of, it is the chase.
Yeah.
Like pushing yourself to the point you can get that.
Yeah, and then that's what she was finding, because then she like felt the soreness after she put the effort in. But the thing that kind of really made the difference was when she was seeing the results. So not only did she feel the soreness after doing the work, but she started to see the results afterwards. She started to feel it in her own self. Her body was kind of changing. She was having to change the size of her clothes. I think she dropped like 2 or 3 dress sizes in the space of a few months. And then from there, other people started to actually notice. So she noticed it for herself in the mirror and things, and then other people actually started to comment on it and saying, "Have you lost weight? Have you changed something, etc." And when she started to realize that actually this kind of soreness, this feeling where she's put herself through something, was giving her that kind of capability from a physique perspective. But then the other thing that was really interesting is actually the mental side of it. So one of the things that she was finding is, as she was working out on a daily, weekly kind of basis, depending on what she was doing, her mental health actually improved dramatically. She felt herself become more stable, become a lot more creative. She had a lot more ideas being generated. She found she had more energy and enthusiasm for things and enthusiasm for life, not just from her own perspective for a training, but actually that kind of oozed out into what was happening with her and the little one, what was happening with her and her business, her works, etc. So yeah, it was just beautiful to kind of listen and then kind of hear from her perspective how her opinion of DOMs kind of changed from being never going to like soreness to actually, I can now see how this benefits me, and I know that when I've got the soreness, I've actually done the right thing for my body. That then means I'm going to have all these other knock-on benefits as well.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It is. It really is, and it kind of brings us nicely then to think about things like cardio as well, and how do we kind of introduce that? Because we started talking a bit about cardio when we were talking about walking.
Yeah, and running.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I found is my original change. Obviously, a lot of that was done through weight training and resistance training, and that kind of was the big turning point for me. Was being able to apply that directly onto actually transforming my physique. Up until then, I think a lot of the work I'd done, I kind of had that misconception that a lot of people have, is that I didn't want to bulk up. I just wanted to be a bit healthier, really, and to kind of lose the weight. So it was a lot of cardio kind of work being done, a little bit of resistance training from my original set of PTs, and that kind of didn't really put the mustard. It didn't make the change. Whereas actually, when I started to really focus on the resistance training and getting my meals right, and then really feeling those kind of changes and understanding the laws of adaptation, that really kind of is where my transformation started to take shape. But it wasn't really until this year that I really started to concentrate on the cardiovascular side. And one thing I've found from this year is just simple things like my lung capacity has improved dramatically. My energy levels are just through the roof, which absolutely astounds me, because I thought actually going through the transformation in the first place was great, and being able to do the resistance training, but then adding on top the additions now of doing the running and the cardiovascular fitness, it's just fantastic.
And my journey was the other way around, really. Started more definitely cardio-based sports, and then I've now moved into the resistance training. And the balance of them, they do just work pretty well hand in hand for the energy, because it's quite easy to do too much cardio as well. Like, you got to be aware of that. Too much and you just burn out from it. Whereas resistance training, you can't really do the same volume. They kind of force you to have that break, that recovery period. But both of them together are perfect.
Yeah, and I think if you've hit on a nice thing there, which is talking about those kind of recovery periods and making sure we periodicize our exercise in a way that allows us those recovery times. And especially when we're thinking about, it's like mixing all these different things, because if we're trying to create this kind of balanced life where we're having this energy, we're having this way of building and adapting our body in certain ways to fit the goals that we've got for our lives, then we're going to be bringing in, elements of resistance training. That's almost like a given. We need to utilize that almost like as a basic. And then we're going to bring in there things like stretching to make sure, we keep that mobility in our bodies as well. We're going to start looking at things like cardio to improve our cardiovascular performance, and to make sure we've got that kind of additional energy level, because we're building mitochondria there. That's the kind of the powerhouse of our cells. And yeah, so you need to then think, okay, well, actually, I can't do this every day. And if we look at things like resistance training, different people recover at different rates. So for one person, it might take, I don't know, a couple of days, and their arms, their biceps and triceps are probably recovered enough to be able to then do another session. Whereas legs might take a little bit longer. So for some people, that might take 5 to 9 days to be able to recover from. And it's understanding actually how does your body perform, and actually what interval do you need to put in there, so you're giving it time to recover in between each session.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. So any other kind of questions, any other thoughts?
Not from me. This has been quite a good episode, though.
You've
A lot of
enjoyed
good
it?
insights. Yeah, it's been good. I've not spoke as much as the other ones, but I've just been listening and taking it in. So thank you. I'll try to apply some of it to my own workings.
Yeah, and again, it's interesting seeing your journey and being able to compare it, because obviously there's a generational difference straight away, and obviously I'm bringing to my life. I wasn't as sporty as you've been. You've literally been bouncing around like a gazelle on steroids since you were knee high to a grasshopper.
Yeah, but then it's changed in a different way, because like my frontal cortex or whatever it is that changes, that gives you like the seeking adrenaline kind of thing. Like mine has just got very clouded. I'm not like the spaniel that I used to be, I don't think.
Yeah,
I see danger and I see it now, whereas for many years I saw danger and just didn't see it.
Yeah, that is definitely developing a frontal cortex, but that's a completely different conversation. We start talking about brain development and things, and yeah, but that fear factor is something that comes in, and I know from personal experience, that also changes over time. So my fear factor when I was kind of throwing myself down like 15-meter waterfalls strapped to a piece of plastic known as a kayak, it's you suddenly, when you've got a family, you've got responsibilities, and you've got things that you have to get done, you look at these things in a different way. And I think that's just part of naturally where you kind of change in life. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It just means that, your life has changed as well. And it's a bit like friends of ours, when they were, when I'm just thinking back, when they were younger, they did cave diving for many years, which is, I think it's probably just one step above suicide in many respects. It's a mad sport. I mean, strapping yourself to some tin can full of oxygen and squeezing yourself into small locations while underwater and hoping that you're going to get out alive. It's not necessarily one that was ever on my top of my list, but they loved it, and they went to some amazing places and saw some brilliant things. And I can still remember to the day, for example, they were telling me about how some of the best scallops you can find just off the coast of Oman. So apparently that's the best place to get them, and they used to dive and pick up some scallops, and that was their evening meal things when they were doing that diving. But then as they kind of matured and got a little bit older, they moved into doing things like go-karting and motorsports for a while. Then they started into kayaking, and in fact, I did a lot of kayaking with them. We spent about 10 years traveling around Europe, etc., in various different rivers and things alongside the UK. And then from there, we did a lot of move from that sport into mountain biking. And again, it's just as they developed, as they changed, etc., as their interests changed. So it's not necessarily that you stick with the same thing as well. I mean, the thing with movement is it's finding things you enjoy in life, finding things that you want to do, you want to kind of be part of. So, for example, for you, I know the amount of joy and enthusiasm you get for doing the climbing at the moment, but I also know the joy and love you have of skating as well, and what that's done. You've done that all the way around the world. You've skated in like Thailand, Vietnam, Australia, most places in Europe. It's like,
yeah, it's pretty awesome. But yeah, like the balance has definitely shifted from most because of the front. Like I just cannot take the injuries all the time anymore. Like when I was younger, I didn't mind so much, but then when like you have a bad one, it's like, hey, you're out of 6 months. And then you have another bad one and you're out of 6 months. And then you have another bad one and you're out of 6 months. But then it doesn't just affect like doing that sport, it affects everything in life. Like not so much my job now, luckily, but in the past, your job, and then like I can't go hiking because my leg doesn't like bend and stuff. It's just too much and I just can't do it anymore. But I still enjoy the challenge of doing it because we're not designed to stand on a plank of wood and roll about. So it's definitely good for the brain to like push yourself in that way, or at least for me. and it puts me in that space of like complete mental clarity. But I've realised that there's a compromise to be made there. Do that less, because I didn't used to love going climbing, to be honest. Like it felt like good exercise, and it was like once a week. And I started going with my girlfriend, which made it a lot more fun. And then now, because I said like I go away from skating, like no matter what I'm doing, I'm thinking about it. Unless I'm in focus mode, but like if I make my breakfast, I'll go to sleep, it's in my head. And with climbing, it was always like I go, I do it, I leave, I don't think about it until I go, I do it, and I leave, and I don't think about it again. But now I come away like thinking about how I'm going to do it next time, possibly something I can't do, like how I could do it. I'll admit I'm normally kind of a one and done kind of guy. Like if I do the climb, I'm not going to do it again, kind of thing. So, but sometimes I'm not happy with my technique, and I think about how I could do it better and go back the next week and improve it. So, yeah, I think once you get that like joy out of something, it makes something a lot easier.
Yeah. And it's interesting, you kind of touched on a bit there with regards to almost like having these mini goals, these kind of mini things in the middle of it. And a good friend of mine, Mike Dales, he's very much about, setting yourself these kind of mini goals. And for example, he does it with running and moving. So he kind of set a life goal of moving at least 5 kilometers a day. So like walking, cycling, running, etc. And I think he's kept it up for like 15 years. It's like a ridiculously long time. And even to the point where he had to go in for an operation. So he kind of scheduled it so that he had it in the afternoon. So in the morning, he could go do this 5 kilometer walk. He had the operation, had overnight to kind of recover. And then late in the evening, the following day, like literally about 11 o'clock at night, he went out and did like 5 kilometers very slowly. Just because he didn't want to break his chain. He had this kind of mini goal in place. And these things can really help, this challenge, this kind of way of thinking can really help keep these things interesting and fresh for us, so that it's not something where we get really bored. We keep reinventing effectively, how can we keep this interesting for us?
But yeah, I'll say like that doesn't always come at the start, because like the gym, I found it so hard to get into the groove. So hard. Like I tried for so many years to actually do it, and then just forming it as part of my. For me, what worked is putting it in my schedule, basically. So I just do it every day before I do anything else, which I have heard people say before, but I have done it, and it sounds cliche, but it did work. Because that is one thing that I struggled to get into. As I mentioned, like climbing, I didn't love that straight away, because when you're bad at something, it's just because for the gym, like you might not have good form at the start, like climbing, like it was just brute force and no skill involved, as we spoke about like last week, but now building the skill set, and that's what makes it fun. Whereas then there is things like skateboarding that I did love from the start, because even like falling off, just slamming on the concrete, makes you feel alive. Like I like that personally, but like some people won't. Like I think if you fell on concrete all day long, you'd be waking up a bit sore. But I like that feeling. So for me, like that was like instant joy. But yeah, like the climbing and the gym, it took me a little while to get into it.
Yeah, I would definitely wake up a bit sore on the rest. Anyway, I think let's wrap this one up.
Yeah, happy with that.
So I think we've given a few kind of ideas around movement and what movement actually means and things, and certainly, hopefully, giving you guys some food for thought. Certainly of how we've implemented it.
I guess the takeaway is, what does movement mean to you?
So what does movement mean to me? Movement, basically, you've got 2 kind of key areas for movement. One is going to be, your incidental movement, just what you're doing every single day, and just try to include as much as you can, wherever you can. But then at the same time, also have some movement that's been done on purpose. So there's a reason behind moving. So going for that hike, it's doing a bit of cardio, it's doing some resistance training, it's building in that stretching, and really create that as being part of your lifestyle, so that straight away, and just like you said, stick it in your diary so you're not actually cancelling yourself. And we'll come back to more of those kind of tips on how to make these things work better when we talk a bit more about method a bit later.
Perfect. Right, let's wrap it up.
All right, have an absolutely super time ahead, and we'll look forward to speaking with you guys on the next episode. Have fun for now.
Peace out.